Hello, and welcome to the Ottoman History Podcast. This is episode 6, The Conquest of Adrianople. We finished the previous episode in 1355 with the death of Serbian Emperor Stefan Dushan and the disintegration of the Serbian Empire. In 1355, Ottomans looked to be in a prime position to barge in and swiftly take over the Balkans. The Byzantines, as we have established several times by now, were no threat, and Serbia, the main Ottoman rival, was in chaos. However, two events in 1357 instantly changed this status quo, putting a halt to the Ottoman war machine, at least for the time being. The first of these events was the abduction of Prince Halil. Prince Halil was the youngest son of Orhan. In the summer of 1357, he was kidnapped by Greek pirates while he was taking a boat trip near Nicomedia. Immediately after the abduction of Prince Halil, the conqueror of Thrace and the commander of Ottoman armies in Europe, Prince Suleiman, died in a hunting accident around the age of 40. The effects of these two events in Ottoman internal politics cannot be understated. Orhan at this date was an old man at the age of 76. He had lost his energy and ability to wage wars and lead military campaigns. Byzantine historian Nikephoros Gregoras writes that Suleiman was the de facto ruler of the Ottomans since 1340s, as Orhan aged. Especially after his marriage to Cantacuzenos' daughter Theodora in 1346, Orhan had tried to maintain friendly relations with the Romans. In this period, conquests and military campaigns were organized and led by Prince Suleiman. With Suleiman dead, the pro-war faction in the Ottoman court was left without their leader and had lost significant influence. With the abduction of his 12-year-old son, Halil, Orhan ordered all Ottoman forces to cease hostilities against the Byzantines. Halil was Orhan's only son from his new and arguably favorite wife, Theodora. Motivated by his love for his son and likely pleadings of Theodora, Orhan immediately contacted Emperor John to help him free Halil from the pirates. Emperor John was presented with a golden opportunity, and he fully intended to use this hostage crisis as a leverage against the Ottomans. Sultan Orhan, in his desperation, agreed to all the demands Emperor John presented him, in return of John's help in negotiating with the pirates. Ottomans forgave all the debt the Byzantines owed to them, which included loans taken during Cantacuzenos' reign and the tribute that Cantacuzenos had agreed to pay. Orhan also agreed to stop Ottoman expansions in the Balkans and broke his alliance with Matthäus Cantacuzenos. Matthäus was the son of the Ottoman ally, former Emperor John Cantacuzenos, and was the brother-in-law of Orhan. After Cantacuzenos was deposed, Matthäus had seized western Thrace in open rebellion to John V. With Orhan's decision to withdraw support from Matthäus, he was left in a vulnerable position. That year, Matthäus was defeated and captured by a Serbian army. With his capture, the civil war that had brought the Romans to the brink of destruction had ended. The rivalry between Palaiologoi and Cantacuzenoi families was concluded in the favor of the Palaiologoi, and Emperor John V became the undisputed ruler of the Byzantine Empire, or what was left of it. The negotiations for Halil continued for 2 more years until 1359, as Constantinople wanted to drag these negotiations out and capitalize on the consequent Ottoman inactivity as long as it could. Finally, in 1359, the negotiations were concluded with even harsher terms than initially agreed for the Ottomans. According to this agreement, Orhan was to pay 30,000 golden ducats as ransom. Prince Halil was brought to Constantinople from Phocaea, where he was held captive, and was betrothed to his cousin and the youngest daughter of Emperor John, Princess Irene, thus tying him even closer to the empire. And worst of it all, Orhan agreed to nominate Halil as his heir. It might not be immediately obvious for the listeners here, but this deal had the potential to be devastating for the young Ottoman Sultanate. It was clearly made by Emperor John to alienate Orhan's eldest living son, Murad, from the Ottoman court. Prince Halil was born to a strict Byzantine mother, Princess Theodora. Princess Theodora had married Orhan in Constantinople with a Byzantine wedding. She also remained as a devout Christian even after her marriage to Orhan. It is likely that she had significant influence on the young prince, and likely this influence would be against the interest of the Ottoman Turks. However, I am just speculating here, as we do not know much about Halil. Meanwhile, Halil had spent 3 years among the Greeks in Phocaea and Constantinople from the ages of 9 to 12, which likely increased the Roman cultural influence on him at his young age. And on top of it all, he was now betrothed to the daughter of Emperor John V. All this makes it easy to speculate that Halil was being groomed to be a Byzantine ally within the Ottoman state. Maybe more importantly, Halil was only 12 when Orhan announced him as his heir, and he did this while Prince Murad lived. Murad was at the prime age of 25 and had spent the last decade as the governor of Bursa, where he had gained experience in ruling. The only thing he lacked was military experience. Between the two princes, Murad was clearly the more qualified and more popular of the two. Halil was too young, and Orhan's decision to announce him as the crown prince made him seem like an Eastern Roman puppet. By putting his support behind the much weaker prince, Orhan was laying the groundwork for a civil war between the brothers. Halil had the backing of the old sultan and the Byzantine Empire. However, Murad and the army that backed him would never accept the sultanate of Halil peacefully. In his attempt to save his youngest son and please his Byzantine wife, Orhan was unknowingly dooming Halil to death and putting his sultanate at a grave risk of civil war. All this would remain on paper, however. What Emperor John V missed was that the Turks did not believe in appointed succession. Mandate to rule was only given by the god in the battlefield. Orhan's word simply had no value. Maybe this was why Orhan agreed to John's demands, as ultimately his words were meaningless in the matter of succession. Murad, meanwhile, since his older brother Suleiman's death in 1357, was appointed as the commander of the Ottoman armies in Europe, which presented him with a golden opportunity to prove himself as a commander and solidify his support within the army. Murad found the Ottoman situation in Europe delicate. Since 1357, Ottomans had seized all attacks on Byzantine territories, and thus they were stuck in the Gallipoli Peninsula. Yes, they had seized their foothold in Europe, but failed to expand it. This foothold could have been lost just as easily as it was taken. All it needed was one Ottoman setback, and the Ottomans would be back to square one in Anatolia. Emperor John V was well aware of this, and constantly worked since 1355 to organize a crusade against them. He maintained contact with the Pope, who was also aware of the danger the Turks posed to Christian Europe. The emperor wanted to cut off the Ottoman retreat path in the Dardanelles with a crusader navy and smash the stranded Ottoman troops in Europe. Thus John V wrote to the Pope, promising to unite the churches of Rome and Constantinople in an attempt to gain the favor of Rome. The Pope responded favorably. However, it seemed that he was the only one that recognized the grave Ottoman danger to Europe. The greatest Catholic powers in the area, the Republic of Venice and the Kingdom of Hungary, were locked in a war over Dalmatia since 1357. The Venetian government ignored the letters from its ambassador in Constantinople, who wisely urged for decisive action against the Turks. Meanwhile, the other Christian power active in the Aegean, the Republic of Genoa, was enjoying a lucrative trade relationship with the Ottomans, and saw them as an ally against her rival, Venice. Simply, no one wanted to hinder their short-term interests to fight the Ottomans. It is likely that the European courts at the time viewed Ottoman incursions temporary raids. This was going to cost them. The papacy, thus, was only able to gather a small crusader army and a fleet of 20 or so ships. According to Ottoman historian Aşık Paşazade and French historian Philippe Mézières, the crusaders were immediately ambushed upon landing and destroyed. This was the first Ottoman battle against the crusader army, and it was not going to be the last. Murad did not stay on the defensive after this victory. Halil was released in 1359, and the only thing stopping Ottoman expansions was gone. Murad set his raiders loose in Thrace. Ottoman riders were seen at the gates of Constantinople. They raided and pillaged as they went, devastating Byzantine lands and prevented border towns from getting supplies and reinforcements. In no time, Ottoman raiders had overrun anywhere that was not protected by a walled city or fort, crippling the Byzantine military in the region. Murad's main target was Adrianople. However, he first needed to isolate the city completely from Constantinople. Over the next 2 years, Murad's forces seized Banados, Chorollos, Mosonopolis, and Bulgrafigon. With these conquests, Murad was completely severing Constantinople's ties with the mainland Europe, and consequently isolating Adrianople. In 1360, Ottoman troops finished the strangulation of Adrianople and took the city of Didymoteiko, just 40 kilometers south of Adrianople. The military situation was ripe for the siege of Adrianople now. In 1361, Murad marched on Adrianople and camped near Bulgrafigon, while Ottoman commander Lala Şahin Pasha advanced with a vanguard towards the city. The governor of Adrianople sallied out with his forces, but was defeated by Şahin Pasha. The governor fled to Constantinople under the cover of darkness, leaving Adrianople to its fate. With its garrison defeated and governor gone, Adrianople opened its gates to the Ottomans. Adrianople was the third greatest city in the hands of the Byzantine Empire at the time, after Thessalonica and Constantinople herself. It was founded by the Roman Emperor Hadrian and was built by the river Maritsa, some 200 kilometers west of Constantinople. With Adrianople in Ottoman hands, Constantinople now found itself as a Roman island, surrounded by Ottoman Turks on all sides. To south lay the Turkish pond of Marmara Sea, to east the Bosphorus, and then the long-lost Anatolia. To west, with Adrianople fallen, stood Murad's army. It was completely surrounded. Here, instead of directly marching on the city of the world's desire, like many other commanders in history, Murad had started a slow and systematic process of strangulation of Constantinople. The reason the previous sieges of Constantinople ended in defeat was partly due to the assailants going straight for Constantinople and leaving their backs exposed to the enemy. This was especially true for Asiatic armies. Those that wished to besiege Constantinople from Asia had to cross the Bosphorus and then maintain supply lines over the sea. Meanwhile, their armies would be exposing their backs to a hostile Europe, controlled by the Eastern Romans. This meant that these sieges were prone to ending in disasters. A Byzantine naval victory would strand the attackers in a hostile continent. Meanwhile, the Byzantines could gather armies or find allies in Europe and crush the attackers between these armies and the walls of Constantinople, hammer and anvil style. For example, the Arab siege of Constantinople had ended in a devastating failure in 717, as the Byzantine navy cut off the Umayyad Arabs from their supplies. Meanwhile, their Bulgarian allies attacked the Arabs from their rear. As a result, the entire Arab army was destroyed, with no way of getting back to Anatolia. In contrast, Murad first aimed to secure the rest of the Balkans, though it is also true that this decision was probably dictated by his circumstances rather than being a product of strategic planning, or maybe it was a bit of both. Murad was still not the Sultan, thus he had only limited amount of men and resources under his command. He also lacked the siege engineering and naval capability to besiege Constantinople. And lastly, it was certain that an attack on Constantinople would cause an outcry in Christian Europe and trigger a real crusade against the Ottomans. Murad simply could not take Constantinople, and he knew it. Thus, he was instead opting to expand into the rich and undefended Balkan territories and deprive the Byzantines from anything that was not protected by the Theodosian walls of Constantinople. The next year, in 1362, Murad mustered his armies near Adrianople to march against a new enemy, the Bulgarian Tsardom of within. Bulgaria at the time was being invaded by the Kingdom of Hungary, making it a particularly easy target. However, before Murad could proceed with the Bulgarian campaign, he received news from Bursa. Sultan Orhan was dead, and now Murad needed to race to Bursa and claim his throne before his brothers could steal it from him. Thus, the Bulgarian campaign was aborted, and Murad rushed back to Anatolia. Sultan Orhan had doubled the lands he had inherited from his father Osman. He ruled the Ottomans until his death in 1362, 37 years. His cause of death is unknown. However, considering that he was in his 80s when he died, it is safe to assume that he died from old age. During his reign, Orhan quadrupled the lands he had received from his father Osman. His reign saw the conquests of Bursa, Nicaea, Nicomedia, Adrianople, and Ankara. He had transformed his father's small beylik into a regional power that was capable of matching the Serbian Empire in Europe and Karamanids in Anatolia. He is described as a middle-height man with white skin, blue eyes, and blonde hair, which is surprising since he would be the last Ottoman ruler with no European blood. Ottoman historian Shukrullah describes him as a cunning ruler who knew how to take advantage of any situation. He built the first Ottoman school in Nicaea and the first Ottoman mosque in Bursa. He was the first Ottoman ruler to mint coin and style himself as Sultan. Upon his death, he left 6 sons to compete for his throne. As his body was buried in the tomb he built for himself in Bursa, his sons rushed to Bursa to claim his inheritance and the sultanate, though the winner of this race was long determined. Thank you for listening. I will end this episode here with the death of Sultan Orhan. If you have come this far, maybe consider leaving a like, and I will see you in the next episode to talk about the scramble for Orhan's throne. Once again, thank you for listening, and peace be upon you.